like, pull up a chair. If we're short of table space, pull up a table. There are lots of them around.
Well, that's my recollection. How are we doing, Mr. Melvin? Good to see you. Hey, Mr. Watson, how you doing, sir? Good to see you. Good.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for coming by.
Hi there, young partner.
Hey, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
You guys are sure welcome to pull up a chair up here. It's like church if you go right and get to the front. And if you guys want to pull out a table too, just feel free to do that. Laptops don't have to be on glass. They can be. We want to be respectful of the irrevocable gift of your time, so we want to start on time. And the closer on time we start, the closer on time we will be over. So with that, first of all, I want to thank Brad and Cass County Electric and your board for allowing us to utilize this fantastic facility, with great parking and everything. My wife, Chris, she does that for me. She drives. And Chris used to work for Basin Electric. We realize that's the other guys. And I grew up in Kindred. So this building's supposed to be in Kindred, as you know, Jerry, right? You probably voted against that or something. But
Well, we're the only one that works.
my dad was a lineman for Cass County Electric for about 30 years. And when we drove up, he said, "Wow, nice building." I said, "It's not my daddy's co-op anymore." But anyway, thank you for your hospitality. Appreciate that. And also thanks to my good friend Commissioner Doug Gordon, without whom I would look silly sitting here probably. So it's good to. I always say I'm not that smart, but I'm really resourceful. And I think, frankly, in representative democracy, resourcefulness is probably more important than about anything. Because if you don't know the answers, you can find them from somebody who might know them and probably does know them. But more important even than that is the reason we're here, and that is for me to gather some information from you and to get some insight from you all in your membership, the folks that you represent in terms of this farm bill that is being debated as we sit here. When the Senate passed their bill out, I immediately started thinking about the House bill, and once we learned the markup date, I thought, well, that'd be a good day to have a little discussion with people that know something about it and that have a stake in it. So what I want to do today, first of all, is I'm just going to make a few more introductory comments. I would like to have each person around the table introduce themselves and who you represent, if you're representing an organization. And then I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Gordon for his comments on what's happening in the Farm Bill and in agriculture in general from his perspective. And then what I'd like to do is just hear from you. We've got these two bills, the one that passed the Senate, and I think one of the impressive things about the Senate bill, apart from the bill itself, was the fact they passed one. And I think that was somewhat, I think you see that same trend to some degree happening in the House when you see Chairman Lucas and of course Colin Peterson coming together with a bill. I mean, that demonstrates some statesmanship, I think, regardless of the specifics or how you might feel about a particular piece of it. So that's encouraging. One of the things as I watched the Senate process that encouraged me as well was the leadership's ability to keep a whole bunch of amendments from getting attached to it, which is part of the secret, right, to success of getting things done. And so I've been following today as they've been, Dwight, welcome, and just pull up a chair. But as I've been watching the House action today, they've been voting on amendments, and some of them not surprising. One of the first ones was aimed right at the sugar program, and it was soundly defeated. And so, and yet, they're moving it right along. I think, I get a sense, it's easy to get derailed, and I'm an eternal optimist, but I get a sense that this House might actually pass a farm bill, and that maybe we can get it reconciled before September 30th. And that's good for a couple of reasons. First of all, the certainty of the new farm bill is important to all of us and to all of you, but also it's no longer a campaign issue. So we can start working on the long-term future of of the industry in our economy. So I look forward to that. So I'm not gonna get into a lot of my thoughts or specifics on the bills themselves just yet. I will reserve that for a little bit later. But I'd like to go around the room now, have everybody introduce themselves and come back here to Dwight, and then have Commissioner Gordon share some thoughts. Is that good with you?
Yep.
All right, with that, thank you for coming.
Dustin Kleppe with Town Country Credit.
Mike Height with Town and Country Credit Union, and Jeff Olson asked us to represent him as he could not be here today for the credit union.
Appreciate that. We have met with Jeff already, so.
Kurt Christopherson, Town Country Credit Union.
Kevin Skumas, I'm a farmer from Parker, and I'm chairman of the North Dakota Corn Council, and I have a seat on the ethanol committee for that.
Great, thank you.
Jeff Missling, Executive VP of North Dakota Farm Bureau.
I'm Jerry Melvin. I farm and have a commodity brokerage at Buffalo.
Claire Slickty, I'm a farmer and an investor in farmland.
Steve Edwardson, Administrator for the North Dakota Barley Council here in Fargo.
Dan Wadsland, Executive Director, North Dakota Grain Growers Association, out of Mandan.
Steve Strady, I with the North Dakota Grain Bureau Association.
Barry Coleman, Executive Director of Northern Canola Growers District.
Jeff McInnes, farmer from Hillsborough, North Dakota, and I'm here on the board of directors for Rancho Sugar, so I'm kind of here representing the sugar.
Appreciate that.
Paul Matheson at Farmer Thompson, I'm here representing the River Valley Sugar.
Mary Grainer, I'm a farmer rancher and I'm also here representing the Independent Beef Association of North Dakota. My husband couldn't make it, he started harvesting barley today.
Good for him, my goodness. Excellent.
I'm Carol Mater, and my husband Francis and I, we were the founding board of directors of the Independent Beef Association, felt we needed a need for a producer-driven organization. And we ranch by Minokan 51 years, and if you want to know anything about him, I can tell you a lot.
It's all good.
Jake wants to know.
That's right. I'm Dwight Cropper, I'm a farmer from Barnes County, and I also was candidate for the U.S. Senate in 2006.
Thanks for being here, Dwight, and thank all of you for your, for what you're doing and what you've done, and for being here. This is a really great move we'll get you're giving to me and to all of us in this important discussion. With that, Commissioner, give us some insights on agriculture and your thoughts on this bill, and then we'll open it up for some thoughts from you.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Primarily what I'm probably going to do is first of all, thank all of you. This is a great opportunity to tap a resource like this. North Dakota is very diverse, and I know some hear me say this quite often, but when we are in a position where we produce 42 different commodities in this state, and we have such diversity across our state with respect to topography, microclimates, but it's also about the crops and the products that we produce. It's important that we get everybody's perspective, and I'll tell you that a lot of these people I know very well, they bring that perspective, and these are the people we really need to tap and visit with and get their insight and even some of their suggestions, because those things certainly help us shape and form food security acts. With that being said, I'll say also that North Dakota producers and certainly the upper Great Plains producers are very innovative, very progressive, and all of these individuals and their respective organizations came together last August. And they actually were one of the first groups, one of the first states that actually developed a set of priorities that we now actually see in the existing Senate version, and actually components of that exist in the House version. So it'll be interesting how we see things unfold, how they're starting to be shaped up. I know that there is certainly some distance with respect to certain titles in the Farm Bill that are being debated right now between the House and the Senate version. That we'll have to see how close they can come together on some of those. But I will also say that there are issues that have been raised over the last year that are not necessarily being addressed, and I know that some people have some things to talk about here with respect to crop insurance and reimbursement agreements that were not upheld by a risk management agency, and some of the final wage submission process. Also, some good things that did come out of both versions that are being proposed with the specialty crop block grant programs. Those, I will tell you, USDA generally isn't very fond of because it gives all the power to the states. But the states have better insight into what the needs are with respect to those crops, those research projects. And when you look at a state like North Dakota again, with having so many different crops and commodities, it gives us the ability to fund some things that help promote and identify research programs and projects that help them move forward. Some other good things I know came out of both versions is the livestock indemnity program, livestock forage program, also the emergency livestock assistance program. Those programs were funded in 2008. They were adopted and moved forward. A lot of the other things that we talked about for safety net components in previous farm bills do sort of exist now, at least in the Senate version and in some degree in the House version, depending on whether you're looking at a price or a revenue type of product. And we'll see how we sort some of that out. It was interesting to see that both, it looks like research got a bump in both versions. See if we can maintain that and maybe even add to it. And with respect to that too, I know there's been some attacks on the MAP program and the foreign market development program. But it looks like we've maintained some components there. We'll see as we move forward. I know that we have some constraints on time because there's some other commitments this afternoon. We'll see how some of this unfolds, but I know there's a lot of great comments being made by a lot of the individuals around the table. They're very forward-thinking, progressive, and have helped shape North Dakota agriculture and North the Great Plains agriculture.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Doug, for your comments and for your service. With that, I really do, we brought some charts that are just pretty basic, that demonstrate, meant to illustrate some of the differences and similarities between the marked up House bill and, of course, the passed Senate bill. At first blush, they do look very similar. I mean, a lot of the same goals. I think in today's climate, let's face it, we understand agriculture and its importance and can articulate its importance in our states and certainly in the nation's economy, as well as its role in feeding a hungry world. But there's a $16 trillion debt and a whole bunch of people wondering what's going to be our contribution, to getting our budget under control and some deficit reduction going. And certainly the Senate bill did that, and of course the House bill, as it currently stands, attempts to do even more. Not so much on the commodity title, but more on, of course, the nutrition title, so we can talk about that as well. So with that, what I'd like to do is just sort of open it up to whoever wants to go first that represents agriculture or that is a producer, and tell me what you think of the two bills, and what are some things you'd like to see reconciled. If you have any, especially on the House side, any political pressure we can help apply in an area that would be good for North Dakota. So anybody want to go first? Tell us about corn.
Sure. Well, we think that the conservation compliance needs to go away from the crop insurance. That just can't happen, especially in North Dakota. It's such a big deal for North Dakota. We'd also like to see the average gross income provision taken away. Level playing field, we'd like to have that. Another thing that's really under attack right now is the RFS, and as a corn grower and ethanol producing state, we need to keep the RFS. That's just a huge thing. If the RFS goes away, ethanol is a really big deal, especially here in North Dakota. We have a lot of capacity, and if the RFS goes away and corn prices drop, everything drops. One commodity drops, they all drop. That's really important. Fuel security, we're taking from 60% of the imported down to about 45%. If you take some numbers, $1.09 gasoline would be $1.09 higher right now, probably if it wasn't for ethanol in the system. We're doing 10% right now. They actually got a Kansas, they got their first E15 pump just approved and going this week. And if you take $1.09 times our 135 billion gallons of gas that we're consuming in the U.S., that's $140 billion. That ethanol is saving our consumers. I think that's a real big story.
Let me ask you on this, for a minute, this conservation, the decoupling the conservation requirement from the crop insurance program is a pretty big deal, obviously. And that was one of the things that, I don't know that it was a big surprise, but it was a little bit of a surprise. That was one of the few amendments in the Senate that did get attached, and got attached rather late, much to the chagrin of our senators, I know. Is there anybody that thinks it's a good idea? Let me ask that. What about this argument that it creates a perverse sort of incentive to put a bunch of marginal land into production that ultimately could have a snowball effect? I mean, that's the one argument I always hear from places like Iowa. What do we say to that?
Well, I will say that that was one of the attempts that was made by CRP a while back to actually control production. But on the other side of that, things have changed in the last 25 years. We have the technology, we have the practices, the equipment, we have the know-how, and we continue to develop that even more. And the ability to utilize some of that land and take some of what we consider sensitive or marginal land and maintain its ability to stay in production or even put it into production continues to help when we look at feeding our own economy and looking at food security. Now, there are some places that, quite frankly, just probably shouldn't go back into production or shouldn't be in production. But there's still a right by producers across this nation as a landowner to make those decisions, take all the information, and formulate the right answer. And to punish or try to dissuade the ability for our nation to produce its own food and fiber and feed, you gotta wonder if you're not sending the wrong message. So that is some of the comments I have heard back from the ag community. I know they're shared by some of my counterparts across the nation. But we do have to be careful how we tread into this area. And it's unfortunate that this conservation compliance was tied into this. I don't know where the House version is.
Well, I was going to ask if any of you guys have some insight from your national representation about that issue.
Well, I'd just like to say for North Dakota as an example, caveat to that, if conservation compliance was tied back to 1985 when it was originally installed, it would be a way different deal than 20 years of, not today, of course, I thought, 5 inches of rain would be great tonight probably, but we've changed so much, and if conservation compliance was tied to last year's wetlands, it would be a travesty. If we could, Commissioner Goring was with Senator Hogan and Chief White when we talked about doing the 5 years out of 30, an average rainfall. There has to be some common sense in this. We just can't take what's happened the last 20 years. Devil's Lake included.
Right.
We can't do that.
Jerry, you were going to say something.
Well, the important part of it, as far as I'm concerned, is everybody wants to make everything better. And you hear that constantly from the folks through all the different movements. But it appears to me that when it comes to soil, they want to make it poor. Now, in 1904, the USDA published a book, Drainage of Farm Soils, and it went in there about drainage. And one of the paragraphs in there was, in the 50 to 60 years that drain tile has been used, few pieces of equipment have been manufactured to withstand the tremendous pressure on these pieces of equipment. That was in the 1840s or 50s. So when you look at the tremendous amount of salinity we've got out there and how we're going to manage it, drain tile is one of the best ways of doing it, because we've got to get the salts out of here if we want this ground to produce. Now, when Kevin's talking about the ethanol mandates and whatever else, and the poor soils, it's very difficult to go out there on salty ground and expect to get 125 or 150 bushels of corn. You may be down to single digits in some of that ground because it has been saturated with water. It needs to be brought back to or revived, and there's ways of doing that through the techniques that we've got in these past years. So if they were smart enough to figure this out in 1904, well, what's the problem with NRCS and what they're doing today as far as coming with some of these different approaches about letting farmers manage this? And the unproductive ground is never going to be productive. It's going to have another use, in my opinion.
Sure.
But I think the most important thing I like about the House bill is non-compliance with conservation and wetlands. That's up to us as individuals. If we want to raise ducks, that's our choice. If we want to raise corn, that's our choice. It's our money, it's our investment, and I think people need to be able to do their best with those opportunities. And I think risk management and price discovery are two of the things that we work very hard in our business to try to help people with. So you couple all of these things with the crop insurance, and you've got many different ways that a farmer can help himself.
To that point, I think it's important to say also that there is a growing concern that there is more of a stick versus a carrot approach. If you want to accomplish something, step out and do something that actually helps producers make decisions that work for their operation.
You raised the point, I think, Doug, about this block grant program or state block grant program versus this USDA heavy-handedness. And of course, being a state regulator for the last 9 years, and you've been one in some capacity, I don't know that I've ever seen a federal regulation that made more sense than the state one. And so, to the degree that they allow us, at the state level, and allow you all at your level to fashion a program that's, is better than something that comes from Washington, that seems like kind of a no-brainer. I don't know where we all come down on all that. But at any rate, so there's nobody that disagrees that decoupling the conservation program, conservation compliance with crop insurance is a bad idea. Anybody have a sense of the likelihood of the House being able to prevail in that through the reconciliation process, or whether it even prevails in the House? And what's your intelligence?
Well, if it doesn't prevail in the House, it'll be interesting to see what happens when we go to conference committee. And to that end, I think along the lines of regulations, we saw with Cotton Council versus EPA back in 2009, where the attacks were made with respect to FIFRA no longer having primacy and requiring farmers to have NPDS permits. That is now being addressed in the House version, but I'm not sure it's going to stay intact. Because if it doesn't receive those threats in the House, when it gets to conference committee, Fargo Boxer will go after it.
There's a lot of talk of getting rid of direct payments.
Right.
And that's happened before. We had that in the '96 Freedom to Farm bill, and that was a graduated elimination of payments that survived after a few years of getting closer to it. One thing that the '96 Farm Bill did was it decoupled production controls from being involved in the government farm program, which was a tremendous boon for all of us, as we know, growing soybeans and corn, which we would have been so limited under the old program. But I think that argument could be made. If there's such a push to get rid of these direct payments, and it's really going to leave us with nothing but crop insurance, that we really need to say, hey, look, if that's going to happen, we can eliminate these conservation requirements simply by what's our incentive to stay with that? The other thing I really think that needs to occur regarding crop insurance is this issue of the prevent plant provision that is really eliminating millions of acres in North Dakota alone from being covered by crop insurance. Basically because of the conservation compliance. When we waive our rights when we enroll in a farm program, Kevin. We waive our rights to manage water on our lands. And that has caused, especially last year, a tremendous fiasco. I've got a map here that has, it's 300 acres basically in Barnes County that has 59 wetland places on that half section identified by the federal government. And that's that much of that half section being controlled by that. And I think that we can really address two problems, I think. One is this area of these lands being a problem in the first place. if you could start to control some of this water, some of these water problems on this ground, there'd be huge savings to the federal crop insurance. Federal crop insurance is something that kind of works, kind of. It's a program that we as farmers pay, you know, the majority of the premium on, and so we've got an investment in it. But that's what I'd like to see. I'd see that shored up. But I think we could maybe use that as an argue point as far as hey, look, you know what? You want to do away with these direct payments? Then let's take that aspect of the '96 Farm Bill that was good, which was getting rid of production controls, as long as we had to take that to the next level and let us manage the land part of the equation as well.
I guess I like to put it in real simple terms. You know, when Lewis and Clark came up the river, they didn't look around and say, you know what, this is beautiful, let's keep it the way it is. Keep the wetlands here, the trees here, you know, everything there. They came up to discover new lands for people to come up and make a production, whether it's with livestock or whether it's with different crops and whatnot. They didn't, you know, they saw it as an opportunity for everyone to produce something, you know, whatever, whether it's cattle or farmland or whatever. They didn't say, you know what, there's a few ducks over here, let's keep them here, we better not touch this. They came up to discover America for us to prosper, not to set us back. That's kind of a real simple way to look at it, but that's kind of how I feel. The land is here for us to produce food and fiber for America.
But there are a bunch of people in Washington DC who want it to be like Lewis and Clark again, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they do eat.
I think there's some places in northern Canada that are left, though, untouched. Yeah.
I understand. All right. So I think one good takeaway today is decoupling the compliance, conservation compliance with the crop insurance program. It's a good idea, and I hope it prevails. I certainly know Congressman Bird feels that way. He's taking that message to the House, so hopefully that will prevail. What else? What else about the House bill, about the Senate bill? Do you like or don't like, or should we should be advocating for it? Chairman Lucas is a livestock producer, and he looks up for you guys a little more than they did in the Senate, perhaps, right?
Right, and we're all about the livestock title. We'd like to keep, you know, our herd health is very, very important. And now we have Argentina that wants to come up and allow us to import their cattle. Well, they have hoof and mouth disease down there. Oh, but there's this one little area that doesn't. Well, does that mean Oliver County cattle can be exported, but the rest of the state has hoof and mouth? So we can export out of Morton County or something like that? We can't put it into such a small area like that. We have the highest safety standards in the world, but yet they want us to weaken our guidelines and import cattle from other areas. We have the ability to raise enough cattle for ourselves, but what a lot of people don't know is we import cattle and feed the American public, and we export our highest cuts because the packers make a bigger profit. And that's where this country of origin labeling comes into. It's like, why don't we have the ability to distinguish our great beef product? You know where your shirt, you can look at every label on your shirt, you can go to the store and find out where your cigarettes came from, where your fruit came from, where your shoes were made, but you won't know where your beef came from. And that's all about packer control. The packers want to have control of the beef industry so that they get the highest cut. Well, they're not passing that on to the producer. They're going to have, what they're shooting for is packer control. I mean, where can you buy a pig in North Dakota? You can't, because there is no more open market for hogs. You can't buy a hog in North Dakota. So, you know, just like your assistant over here, she was overseas for many years. It's like she couldn't wait to get a good North Dakota steak. Well, why can't we say this is a U.S. born and raised beef? Why should we have to bring cattle in from Canada and Mexico and say it was raised here? Well, they both have diseases. Both of those countries have documented diseases, all right? We have the highest safety standards. We need to keep it that way. We shouldn't be able to import beef, have them raise it in our yards and call it a U.S. product. We bought some beef jerky the other day after a 4-H camp, and it said packaged in the USA. Well, where did the beef come from? We don't know where that beef came from. And so I guess, you know, we're real strong supporters of the country of origin labeling and that it should stay the way it is, that we should be able to identify our beef.
In the gypsy program, gypsy rule, we'd like to keep that very.
I guess it's important to maintain a strong competitive market. Once the packers get control of our beef, they can